The metallic echo of dripping water marked time in the service tunnels of Outpost 94. Willie McAllister adjusted his threadbare thermal jacket, its insulation long since worn thin from years of use in the frigid underbelly of the station. His breath formed small clouds in the dim blue emergency lighting as he tightened a valve on the heat exchange system. Another 12-hour shift of thankless repairs in the forgotten depths beneath the gleaming bio towers that pierced the perpetual blizzards above. "Come on, you ancient piece of junk," he muttered, knuckles whitening as he strained against the frozen valve. A sudden release sent him stumbling backward, nearly slipping on the frost-slick floor. At least the repair was done, one of dozens he'd complete before this shift ended. No one would notice, of course. No one ever did. Willie gazed upward, though several levels of steel and concrete separated him from the bio towers. He could imagine their warmth, their lush hydro gardens and climate-controlled corridors. The residents up there probably never spared a thought for the labyrinth of failing infrastructure beneath their feet, or the technicians like him who kept the outpost from freezing solid. "Not your problem, Willie," he reminded himself, collecting his tools. "Just do the job, collect the credits, survive another day." Survival had become his only purpose in the 5 years since the accident. The memories tried to surface. The emergency klaxons, the screams, the crushing guilt, but he pushed them back into the dark corners of his mind where he kept them locked away. The faces of those he'd failed still haunted his dreams, but in his waking hours, he had become an expert at emotional numbness. Outpost 94 had been the perfect place to disappear. Established as a mining colony on this nameless ice moon, it had evolved into a reluctant melting pot of species from across the sector. The corporation that owned it had long ago decided that maintaining the lower levels to proper standards wasn't cost-effective. As long as critical systems functioned, the deterioration was deemed acceptable. The result was a stark division. The privileged lived in the bio towers above, while workers, outcasts, and those with nowhere else to go inhabited the increasingly hazardous lower levels. Safety protocols existed primarily as entries in forgotten databases. Power outages were common. Equipment failures were expected, and species from a dozen worlds coexisted in an uneasy truce born of mutual dependence rather than trust. Willie made his way through the maze of corridors, acknowledging fellow maintenance workers with brief nods. A heavy-set Brel with crystalline growths protruding from thick gray skin, a pair of spindly Narviri with their characteristic nervous movements. No unnecessary words were exchanged. Down here, everyone respected the unspoken agreement to mind their own business. The alert on his wrist terminal chimed. Another pressure drop in section E17. Probably another crack in the thermal exchange piping. This moon's sub-zero temperatures were relentless in finding weaknesses in the station's aging infrastructure. He changed direction, heading deeper into the maintenance tunnels where the lighting grew even dimmer and the frost patterns on the walls thicker. The sound of his boots echoed in the empty corridors, a rhythmic companion to his solitude. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the mechanical ambience of the tunnels. A sobbing, high-pitched, and punctuated by gasping breaths. Willie paused, turning his head to locate the source. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic. "A child, please fix my mom." The voice whimpered from somewhere ahead. "She won't stop shaking." Willie hesitated. Getting involved in other people's problems had cost him everything once before. His survival here depended on invisibility, on fixing machines, and nothing else. "Please, anyone. She won't stop shaking." The desperation in the voice tugged at something Willie thought had frozen solid years ago. Against his better judgment, he followed the sound, moving past the reported leak, down a rarely used access corridor. The sobbing grew louder as he approached an abandoned storage compartment. The door was ajar, the locking mechanism long since disabled. Willie peered inside, his handheld work light illuminating the scene in harsh white. A child, clearly not human, crouched on the floor beside an adult figure convulsing violently against the metal plating. The child had pale blue skin that seemed almost translucent in places, with large amber eyes that reflected his light with a cat-like glow. The child's thin arms were wrapped around the shaking adult, trying futilely to still the movements. When those amber eyes locked onto Willie, they widened with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Please," the child whispered, "fix my mom. She won't stop shaking." Willie approached cautiously, the light revealing more details of the scene. The adult, the mother, had the same blue skin as the child, though hers was marred with a network of faint green lines that pulsed with an unnatural light. Her entire body trembled in rhythmic spasms, eyes half open but unseeing, mouth working silently. The child couldn't be more than 8 or 9 by human standards, Willie thought, though who knew with alien species? What struck him most was the absolute terror and exhaustion on the small face. "What happened to her?" Willie asked, kneeling at a cautious distance. "The cold light," the child whispered. "They put the cold light inside her, and now she won't stop shaking." Willie didn't understand, but the immediate problem was clear. Both mother and child were dangerously cold in this abandoned section. The mother's convulsions were scraping her skin against the metal floor, leaving faint streaks of phosphorescent blue blood. "What's your name?" Willie asked, removing his jacket. The child hesitated before answering. "Elara. My mom is Lyra. We're Xylosian." "I'm Willie," he replied, carefully draping his jacket over the convulsing woman. "I'm going to help you move her somewhere warmer. Okay?" Elara nodded, amber eyes never leaving his face, as if searching for signs of deception. Willie considered his options. Taking them to the medical bay was out of the question. Too many questions, too much official attention. His own quarters were small but private, and more importantly, he'd modified the heating system there to actually work properly. "I need to lift her," he explained to Elara. "It might look like I'm hurting her, but I'm trying to help." Willie slid his arms beneath Lyra's trembling form, noting how lightweight she was despite her adult size. Her skin felt cool and slightly textured, like fine satin. The green lines pulsed against his hands as he lifted her, and he felt a slight tingling sensation where they touched his skin. "Follow me," he told Elara, who trailed behind as he carried Lyra through the service tunnels, taking the least used routes back to his quarters. The shaking never ceased, though Lyra occasionally emitted soft, pained sounds that made Willie quicken his pace. His room was barely large enough for his narrow bed, a small desk, and minimal storage, but it was secure and warm thanks to his illicit modifications to the heating system. He gently laid Lyra on his bed, then activated all heating elements to their maximum capacity. Elara hovered uncertainly by the door until Willie gestured her inside. "It's safe here," he assured her, though he wasn't entirely convinced of that himself. "Now, can you tell me what happened?" As the room gradually warmed, Elara moved to her mother's side, small blue fingers stroking Lyra's forehead in a soothing gesture. The child's words came haltingly at first, then in an anxious rush. "We came here 3 months ago. Mom was a botanist. They said they needed her expertise for the Hydra Gardens in Tower 7. Alara's large eyes blinked rapidly. Everything was okay at first. We had a small apartment in the lower residential section of the tower. Mom worked in the research labs. But then they asked her to join a special project. Willie found a thermal blanket in his storage compartment and carefully arranged it over Lyra, whose shaking seemed to diminish slightly in the increased warmth. "What kind of project?" he prompted. "Emotional recalibration." Elara pronounced the words carefully, as if reciting something she'd heard often. "They said it would help her work better, feel better. They put something inside her." The child's voice hitched. She didn't want it, but they said her work contract required compliance with all research initiatives. Willie frowned, using a clean cloth to wipe away the blue blood where Lyra's skin had been abraded. "Something inside her? Like an implant?" Elara nodded vigorously. They made her go for treatments with the cold light. After each one, she came back different. Less like Mom. More. She struggled to find the words. More empty, but still smiling. Always smiling, even when her eyes looked scared. Willie had heard rumors about experimental procedures in the upper towers, but like most maintenance workers, he dismissed them as exaggerated tales. Now, examining Lyra more carefully, he noticed a small, slightly raised area beneath the skin at the base of her skull. The green lines appeared to emanate from this point. Last week, something went wrong. Ilara continued, amber eyes filling with luminescent tears. She came back shaking. She couldn't stop. She kept saying we had to run, had to hide. She took me from our apartment when no one was watching. We've been hiding ever since, but she keeps getting worse. Willie retrieved his diagnostic scanner from his toolkit. It was designed for mechanical systems, not biological ones, but the basic principles weren't entirely dissimilar. He carefully scanned the raised area at Lyra's neck. The scanner detected an active electronic signal. Weak, but steady, definitely artificial. Some kind of transmitter. They're tracking her, he muttered, then looked at Ilara. Did anyone follow you? The child's expression crumpled with fresh fear. I don't know. We kept moving. Mom could still walk at first, but yesterday she couldn't anymore. I found that empty room and thought we'd be safe, but she got so cold. Willie's mind raced. If someone had implanted a tracking device in Lyra, they likely knew exactly where she was. The fact that no one had found them yet might mean they weren't looking, or they were biding their time. He made a quick decision, pulling a signal disruptor from his toolkit, a device he used to bypass security locks during maintenance work. It wasn't designed for this purpose, but he modified it quickly, setting it to jam the specific frequency the implant was transmitting on. This might help temporarily, he explained, placing the device near Lyra's head. But we need to understand what's happening to her if we're going to fix it. Can you fix her like you fixed the machines? Ilara asked, her voice small and hopeful. Willie felt a pang in his chest. People aren't machines, Ilara. But I'll try to help. Over the next few hours, Willie brought food and water for Ilara, who ate ravenously. It became clear the child hadn't had a proper meal in days. He managed to get some water into Lyra, though much of it spilled down her chin as she continued to shake. In the warmth of his quarters, her violent convulsions had subsided to a constant tremor, but she remained largely unresponsive, eyes occasionally fluttering open but seeing nothing. While Ilara finally succumbed to exhaustion and slept curled against her mother, Willie used his terminal to search for any information on xylogens and the mysterious cold light treatment. He found little beyond basic biological data. Xylogens were a photosynthetic humanoid species with natural bioluminescent properties, their metabolism partially dependent on specific light wavelengths. Nothing about experimental procedures or implants. When his shift alarm sounded, he silenced it immediately. For the first time in 5 years, he would miss work. The consequences could be severe: reduced rations, possible eviction from his quarters. But something about Ilara's desperate plea had awakened a protective instinct he thought long dead. When Ilara woke, Willie was preparing a nutrient solution that might be more compatible with xylogen physiology based on the limited information he had found. Your mom needs nutrients, he explained. This might help her strength. As he carefully administered the solution to Lyra, Ilara watched him with solemn intensity. You're different from the other humans we met, she observed. Willie didn't respond immediately, focused on his task. Finally, he said, I'm just a technician. I fix things that break. Why are you helping us? The question hung in the air. Why indeed? Every instinct for self-preservation told him to turn them in, or at minimum, move them somewhere else. Instead, he found himself becoming more involved with each passing hour. Because you asked, he finally said, then added more softly, and because a long time ago, I didn't help when I should have. I'm trying to do better now. He didn't elaborate, and Ilara didn't press. Instead, she began to share more about her mother, how Lyra had been renowned on their homeworld for her work with rare photosynthetic fungi, how she sang Ilara to sleep with songs about the ancient light force of Xylos, how she had taken the contract on Outpost 94 after Ilara's father had died to give them a fresh start. As Ilara spoke, Willie noticed Lyra's tremors momentarily soften at the sound of her daughter's voice. He encouraged Ilara to keep talking, to tell stories of home. The child's descriptions painted images of a world where light was life. Bioluminescent forests, cities built from living crystal, ceremonies that revolved around the rhythmic pulses of communal light sharing. Mom always said that even in the darkest places, xylogens can find light. Ilara said, her small hand resting on her mother's arm. I don't think she can find it anymore. While they talked, Willie continued to monitor station communications through his maintenance access. By midday, he found what he feared, a security alert regarding 2 missing research participants from Tower 7. The alert was coded as routine, but the designated response team wasn't the regular station security. Instead, it was a specialized unit from Tower 7 itself. They needed to move, but where? His quarters were relatively safe for now, with the signal disruptor blocking Lyra's implant, but it was only a matter of time before someone noticed his absence from work or the power drain from his modified heating system. That evening, as Willie prepared another nutrient solution, Lyra's eyes suddenly opened wide. Unlike her previous vacant stares, this time there was awareness in her gaze. "Ilara," she whispered through chattering teeth, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Mom!" Ilara cried, throwing her arms around her mother's still trembling form. Lyra's luminescent, green-tinged gaze found Willie. "They're coming," she managed to say. "The gray coat. He knows." I didn't respond to her call. "Who's the gray coat?" Willie asked, moving closer. Lyra's expression contorted with fear. "Dr. Eris Thorne, project lead. Cold light was his creation. Meant to recalibrate emotional responses. Create perfect workers. No fear. No dissent." Her words came in gasps between shudders. "Something went wrong with me. My system rejected the final calibration. He wanted to reset me completely." "Reset you?" Willie echoed, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the station's perpetual cold. "Mind wipe," Lyra clarified, her trembling intensifying. "Start over." But I heard them when they thought I was sedated. The implant was bonding differently with my neural pathways, creating unexpected patterns. "Thorne wants to study the anomaly." She clutched Ilara's hand. "Had to run. Protect my daughter. They would use her to control me." The effort of speaking seemed to exhaust her. Her eyes fluttered, closed again, but the trembling continued unabated. "The implant," Willie speculated. "It's still active, still affecting her nervous system, even though she's resisting its primary function." Ilara looked at him with renewed hope. "Can you remove it?" Willie shook his head grimly. "I'm no surgeon, Ilara. From what I can tell, it's integrated with her nervous system. Removing it incorrectly could paralyze or kill her. But there might be another way. If the implant was sending signals to Lyra's nervous system, perhaps those signals could be interrupted more permanently than his makeshift disruptor allowed. It would require parts he didn't have, knowledge he barely grasped. "I need to get some supplies," he told Ilara. "I'll lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." The maintenance storage areas held components that might be repurposed for his needs. Willie moved quickly but cautiously through the tunnels, hyper-aware of any unusual activity. He collected neural conductor wire from communication relay repair kits, a more powerful signal modulator from a defunct security terminal, and various other components that might prove useful. On his return journey, he spotted them, 3 figures in white armor moving with deliberate precision through a connecting corridor. They carried specialized scanning equipment, sweeping methodically through each section. The Tower 7 security team, no doubt searching for Lyra and Ilara. Willie pressed himself into a recessed maintenance shaft, hardly daring to breathe as they passed. Their armor was unlike the standard station security gear, more advanced, with integrated environmental controls and weapon systems that looked military-grade. This wasn't a simple retrieval. They were equipped for combat. Once they moved on, Willie took a circuitous route back to his quarters, using service passageways rarely traveled even by maintenance personnel. His mind raced with half-formed plans. They couldn't stay in his quarters, but Lyra wasn't stable enough for prolonged movement through the station. They needed a safer location and a way to neutralize the implant's effects. When he returned, he found Ilara singing softly to her mother in a language his translator couldn't process. The melody was haunting, rising and falling like waves of light. Lyra's trembling seemed less violent during the song, her expression almost peaceful despite the continued involuntary movements. "That helps her," Willie observed as he entered, securing the door behind him. Alara nodded. It's a light song from home. Mom used to sing it to me when I was scared. Willie spread out the components he'd gathered on his small desk. I'm going to try something, he explained. I think I can build a device that might help block the signals from the implant more effectively. It won't fix her completely, but it might reduce the shaking enough for her to function. As he worked, combining his practical knowledge of the station's systems with educated guesses about neuroelectronic interfaces, Alara watched with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that revealed a surprisingly advanced understanding of technology for a child her age. On Xylos, technology and biology are more connected, she explained when he commented on her knowledge. Mom taught me that understanding how things connect is important for a botanist. The device Willie constructed was crude but functional, a small transmitter programmed to emit a counter-frequency to the implant's signal, connected to a power cell that could last several days if conserved carefully. The real challenge would be calibrating it to the exact frequency needed to neutralize the implant without causing additional damage to Lyra's nervous system. This will take some trial and error, he warned Alara. It might make her worse before it makes her better. With Alara's nervous permission, Willie attached the device to the base of Lyra's skull, near the implant site. He started with the lowest power setting, gradually increasing it while monitoring for any change in her condition. At first, nothing happened. Then, as he adjusted the frequency, Lyra's entire body went rigid, a small cry escaping her lips. "Stop!" Alara cried, but Willie was already adjusting the settings, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "Almost there," he muttered, making one final calibration. Suddenly, Lyra's body relaxed. The trembling didn't cease entirely, but its intensity decreased dramatically. Her eyes opened, clearer than before, and fixed on Alara. "My light," she whispered, raising a still trembling hand to touch her daughter's face. The moment of connection was interrupted by a station-wide announcement, a rare occurrence in the lower levels. "Attention all residents of Outpost 94. This is a security notification. 2 potential biohazard carriers have escaped quarantine from Tower 7 research facilities. A Xylosian female and juvenile, potentially contagious with a new strain of neurodegenerative disease. Any sightings should be reported immediately to Tower security. A reward is offered for information leading to their containment. Repeat, these individuals are highly contagious and dangerous." Willie and Alara exchanged alarmed looks. The announcement was clearly designed to turn the entire station against them, ensuring no one would offer help. "We need to move," Willie decided. "They're getting closer, and now we'll have civilians looking for you too." Lyra struggled to sit up, her movements jerky but controlled. "Where?" she asked, her voice stronger than before. Willie considered their options. The lower maintenance tunnels extended throughout the station, including areas rarely visited even by technicians like himself. There were sections abandoned decades ago when the station's operations had contracted, areas marked as structurally unsound or contaminated to discourage exploration. "There's an old emergency evacuation route," he said finally. "It leads to a set of airlocks designed for mass evacuation if the station ever faced catastrophic failure. They connect to an old surface transport bay. If we can reach it, we might find a way outside." "Outside?" Alara's eyes widened. "But this moon's surface is frozen. We die." "Maybe not," Willie countered. "I've maintained the environmental suits stored there. Some should still be functional. And there are rumors among the maintenance crews about abandoned structures beyond the station's perimeter, old mining operations or research outposts. If they exist, they might offer shelter." It was a desperate plan, but their alternatives were dwindling. With security actively hunting them and the station population now alerted to their presence, staying within Outpost 94 would only end in capture. Willie gathered essential supplies, food, water, medical components, tools, while Alara helped Lyra dress in additional layers to combat the cold they would face. The counter-signal device seemed to be working, allowing Lyra to move with intent despite continued tremors. "Thank you," Lyra said to Willie as he helped her to her feet. "Why risk yourself for strangers?" Willie avoided her gaze, checking the power level on the counter-signal device instead. Let's just focus on getting you both somewhere safe. They left Willie's quarters during the artificial night cycle, when corridor traffic was at its minimum. With Lyra's support between them, they made slow but steady progress through the service tunnels, descending to levels where even the emergency lighting functioned only intermittently. Willie led them through a bewildering maze of passages, some so narrow they had to proceed in single file, others partially blocked by collapsed ceiling panels or frozen pipes. The temperature dropped noticeably as they moved deeper, their breath forming clouds in the beam of Willie's work light. Alara never complained, though Willie could see exhaustion creeping into her small frame. Lyra fought against her body's continued rebellion, occasionally stumbling when a stronger tremor overtook her, but always pushing forward. They had just reached a junction leading to the abandoned evacuation route when Willie's portable scanner picked up movement ahead, multiple signals moving in formation. "Back," he whispered urgently, pulling them into a recessed utility alcove barely large enough for the three of them. He doused his light, plunging them into near-total darkness save for the faint bioluminescence of Lyra and Alara's skin, which they covered as best they could with the dark fabric of their clothing. The search team moved with disciplined precision, their helmet lights sweeping the corridor in coordinated patterns. There were 5 of them, each wearing the same advanced white armor Willie had glimpsed earlier. They carried specialized scanning equipment that made Willie's heart sink, technology designed to detect biological signatures. Even hidden, they would be discovered if those scanners passed close enough. "They're boxing us in," Lyra whispered, her technical knowledge apparently extending to security tactics. Standard containment protocol. Willie assessed their situation with growing dread. The search team was between them and their planned escape route. Backtracking would lead them into more populated areas of the station. They were running out of options. Then Alara tugged at his sleeve, pointing upward. Above them, a maintenance access hatch led to the environmental control ducts, narrow tunnels that housed air circulation equipment. Too small for the armored security team to follow, but potentially large enough for them. Willie nodded, lifting Alara toward the hatch. The child worked the manual release with surprising skill, opening the panel without making a sound. He boosted her inside, then helped Lyra, whose trembling hands made the climb difficult but not impossible thanks to the counter-signal device. Willie followed last, securing the hatch behind them just as the lights from the search team's helmets illuminated the alcove they had vacated. The duct was claustrophobically tight, forcing them to crawl in single file. The metal was frigid against their hands and knees, and the air moved in rhythmic pulses as the circulation system cycled. They progressed slowly, with Willie guiding them based on his mental map of the station's infrastructure. After what felt like hours of painful crawling, they reached a junction where the duct widened enough for them to rest momentarily. Willie checked his portable scanner, confirming they had moved beyond the search team's position. "We're near the evacuation route," he whispered. "One more section of ducts, then we can drop down into a maintenance corridor that should be clear." Alara nodded tiredly, her earlier energy flagging. Lyra's condition had deteriorated during their journey, the tremors increasing despite the counter-signal device. Willie adjusted it again, providing temporary relief, but the power cell was depleting faster than he'd anticipated. They continued through the ducts, eventually reaching an exit panel that opened into an abandoned corridor. Emergency lighting glowed a dull red here, casting long shadows as they carefully descended from the duct. This section of the station had been sealed off years ago, following a structural integrity warning. The air was stale but breathable, the walls covered with frost patterns that had grown undisturbed for decades. Their footsteps echoed in the silence as Willie led them toward the emergency evacuation bay. The massive doors to the bay were sealed, but Willie had anticipated this. He accessed the manual override panel, connecting his maintenance bypass tool to activate the emergency protocols. With a groan of protesting metal, the doors began to part, revealing the cavernous space beyond. The evacuation bay was a relic from the station's early days, designed to allow the entire population to evacuate via surface transport vehicles if necessary. Now it stood empty save for storage containers and equipment covered in layers of dust and ice. Most importantly, along one wall stood a row of environmental suits, outdated but potentially functional. "We need to hurry," Willie said, moving toward the suits. Once these doors opened, security systems might have activated despite my bypass. He selected 3 suits that appeared in the best condition, quickly checking their integrity and life support systems. To his relief, 2 were fully functional. The third had a compromised heating element, but would still provide protection from the vacuum and extreme cold outside. As they began to don the suits, a voice echoed through the bay, calm, clinical, and chilling in its certainty. A valiant effort, but ultimately futile. They turned to see a lone figure standing at the bay entrance. Unlike the armored security team, this man wore a long gray coat over a white uniform. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but his eyes were sharp with calculation as they fixed on Lyra. "Dr. Eris Thorne, I presume," Willie said, positioning himself between the newcomer and the Xylosians. The man inclined his head slightly. "You have me at a disadvantage, Technician McAllister," Willie answered, mind racing to evaluate their options. The airlocks leading to the surface were only 20 meters away, but with Lyra's condition and Alara's exhaustion, they couldn't move quickly enough to escape if Thorne called in his security team. "Technician McAllister," Thorne repeated, as if committing the name to memory. "You've involved yourself in matters far beyond your clearance level. However, I'm willing to overlook this transgression if you step aside now." "What did you do to her?" Willie demanded, nodding toward Lyra, who stood trembling beside Alara, her eyes fixed on Thorne with undisguised terror. Thorne's expression remained pleasant, almost indulgent. Subject L7 participated in an authorized neurological research program. Her current condition is merely an unforeseen side effect we're eager to address. "By reset, you mean?" Willie countered. "I know what you planned for her." Something cold flickered in Thorne's eyes. The emotional recalibration project represents the future of cognitive enhancement. Subject L7 developed an unprecedented neural resistance pattern during the final phase of treatment. Rather than a failure, she's become our most valuable data point. He shifted his gaze to Lyra. "Your neural architecture is rewriting itself in ways we never predicted, creating new pathways around the calibration nodes. You're not fighting the process, you're evolving with it." Lyra shuddered visibly at his words. "You're using people as experiments," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "Destroying their autonomy. Improving them," Thorne corrected. "Imagine workers without fear or distraction. Scientists without ethical hesitation. A population that accepts their role without question." His smile didn't reach his eyes. The corporation has invested heavily in this vision. While Thorne spoke, Willie noticed Alara had slipped partially behind one of the storage containers. The child's hand was reaching for something, an emergency release valve for the bay's fire suppression system. If activated, it would flood the area with fire-retardant foam, creating a momentary distraction. Willie needed to keep Thorne's attention away from her. "And what about her daughter? Was she next on your list of test subjects?" Thorne's expression remained unchanged. Children adapt remarkably well to neurological modifications. Their developing brains form new connections with efficiency adults cannot match. He took a step forward. "But this discussion, while intellectually stimulating, has reached its conclusion. My security team is already converging on this location." As if on cue, the distant sound of booted feet echoed from the corridor beyond. They had minutes at most. Alara's fingers closed around the emergency release valve. "Now!" Willie shouted. The child yanked the valve with all her strength. Warning klaxons blared as nozzles in the ceiling activated, spraying dense white foam throughout the bay. Thorne staggered backward, momentarily blinded and disoriented. Willie grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the airlock while Alara darted ahead of them. "Get in the suits," he shouted over the alarms. They struggled into the environmental suits, fumbling with seals and connections in their haste. Willie helped Lyra, whose trembling hands couldn't manage the complex fastenings. The foam was beginning to dissipate, and Thorn was calling orders to his approaching security team. As the first armored figures appeared at the bay entrance, Willie sealed Alara's helmet, then his own. He activated the emergency airlock protocol, overriding safety measures that would normally prevent opening to the surface without proper authorization. Hold on to each other, he instructed through the suit's communication system. The decompression will be violent. The outer airlock doors began to open just as Thorn's security team opened fire. Energy bolts struck the wall beside them, melting through metal designed to withstand extreme conditions. Willie pushed Lyra and Alara into the airlock chamber, following immediately after. He slammed his fist against the emergency cycle button. The inner doors slid shut, sealing them off from their pursuers. Through the reinforced viewport, Willie could see Thorn watching them, his expression no longer pleasant but cold with fury. The outer doors continued their agonizingly slow opening. Beyond them lay the moon's surface, a wasteland of ice and perpetual night, illuminated only by the distant primary star and the artificial lights of Outpost 94 piercing the darkness. A violent impact shook the airlock chamber, Thorn's team attempting to force entry. The inner door buckled slightly, but held. Finally, the outer doors opened fully. The explosive decompression sucked them out onto the moon's surface with disorienting force. They tumbled across the ice, the low gravity allowing them to slide farther than would have been possible in standard conditions. Willie struggled to his feet first, the suit's stabilizers compensating for the reduced gravity. He helped Lyra and Alara up, checking their suit integrity with frantic haste. All three suits remained sealed, life support functioning. "We need to move," he urged, pointing away from the stations. "Lights. They'll be coming after us." Through their helmet visors, he could see Alara's face contorted with fear and Lyra's with determination despite her continued tremors. They began to move across the frozen landscape, each step a careful negotiation with the treacherous ice and low gravity. Behind them, emergency lights flashed as Outpost 94 responded to the unauthorized surface access. It wouldn't be long before pursuit vehicles were deployed. Their only advantage was the vastness of the moon's surface and the storm building on the horizon, a swirling mass of ice crystals and frozen gas that would reduce visibility to zero but also expose them to dangerous conditions. They trudged onward, the station's lights gradually diminishing behind them as they entered a region of ice ridges and deep crevasses. The storm approached with alarming speed, the first tendrils of icy wind buffeting them despite their suit's protection. "We need shelter." Lyra's voice crackled through the communication system, her words punctuated by the familiar rhythm of her tremors. Willie scanned the horizon, the suit's enhanced vision mode revealing the topography ahead. There, partially obscured by an ice formation, was an angular shape too regular to be natural, some kind of structure. "This way," he directed, leading them toward it. As they drew closer, the structure revealed itself, an abandoned mining platform, its support struts embedded deep in the ice. It had clearly been forsaken years ago when that particular vein of whatever resource they had been extracting was depleted. The main structure offered protection from the direct force of the storm, creating a relatively sheltered area beneath its bulk. They huddled in this makeshift shelter as the storm enveloped them completely, reducing visibility to nil. The howling wind and scraping ice crystals created a constant background noise that made communication difficult even through their suit systems. Willie checked the counter-signal device attached to Lyra's suit. Its power was critically low. Without it, her tremors would return to their full intensity, making survival in these conditions nearly impossible. "I need to conserve the device's power," he explained. "I'm going to deactivate it temporarily while we wait out the storm." Lyra nodded understanding. When he switched off the device, her trembling immediately intensified, but she gritted her teeth, determined to endure. Alara moved closer to her mother, taking her gloved hand. Even through the layers of their environmental suits, the gesture seemed to provide comfort to both. They waited in tense silence as the storm raged around them. Hours passed, marked only by the gradual depletion of their suits' heating systems. Willie's suit, with its compromised heating element, grew increasingly cold, but he said nothing, unwilling to worry the others. Eventually, the storm's fury began to subside. As visibility gradually improved, Willie activated his suit scanner, searching for any signs of pursuit. To his relief, the storm appeared to have deterred immediate follow-up from Outpost 94, but that wouldn't last forever. "We need to keep moving," he said. "The storm has given us some time, but they'll be searching as soon as conditions permit." "Where can we go?" Alara asked, the fatigue evident in her voice despite the suit's audio filters. "There's nothing out here but ice." Willie hesitated. He had no real plan beyond escaping the immediate threat. Survival on this moon's surface was impossible long-term. Their suits had limited air and power, and the temperatures would kill them quickly once those resources were depleted. Then Lyra spoke, her voice shaking but resolute. "The technicians, in the hydroponics lab, they spoke of heat vents, natural geothermal activity beyond the northern perimeter. The corporation considered building there initially, but chose this location for the mineral deposits instead." "Heat vents," Willie repeated. "You mean actual geothermal activity? On this moon?" Lyra nodded within her helmet. "They showed me survey data. Approximately 30 kilometers north of the outpost. A valley protected from the worst storms by surrounding ridges. Temperatures within survivable range due to underground thermal activity. It was their only hope, however slim." Willie oriented himself using the suit's navigation system, identifying the northern direction relative to Outpost 94's position. 30 kilometers is a long journey in these conditions, he warned. "Our suits weren't designed for extended surface excursions." "We have no choice," Lyra replied. "We can't go back." They set out across the frozen wasteland, moving as quickly as the treacherous terrain and low gravity allowed. Willie reactivated the counter-signal device for Lyra at intervals, giving her periods of reduced trembling to conserve her strength before switching it off again to preserve power. The landscape was hauntingly beautiful in its desolation, vast ice plains giving way to crystalline formations that captured and refracted the distant starlight. In different circumstances, Willie might have appreciated the otherworldly beauty. Now, he saw only the countless ways it could kill them. They traversed ice ridges, skirted dangerous crevasses, and struggled through fields of powdery snow that swallowed their legs to the knee with each step. Their progress was painfully slow, and Willie watched with growing concern as their suit power levels gradually depleted. Alara maintained remarkable resilience for a child her age, keeping pace without complaint, though Willie could see her exhaustion in the droop of her shoulders and the drag of her steps. Lyra pushed through her condition with stubborn determination, refusing to become the liability Thorn had reduced her to. Hours into their journey, they crested a particularly steep ice formation and were met with a view that stopped them in their tracks. Below, stretching to the horizon, was a vast canyon cutting through the ice like a wound in the moon's surface. And rising from multiple points within it were columns of vapor, unmistakable evidence of the geothermal activity Lyra had described. "We found it," Alara whispered in awe. The sight gave them renewed energy. They made their way carefully down the ice slope toward the canyon floor, where the change in temperature was immediately noticeable. Their suit sensors registered an increase of nearly 40 degrees from the surface temperatures they had been enduring, still well below freezing, but significantly more survivable. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, following the increasing temperature gradient, the ice beneath their feet gave way to exposed rock in some areas. Here and there, pools of dark liquid, water kept from freezing by the heat from below, created oases in the otherwise frozen landscape. They approached one of the vapor columns cautiously. It rose from a fissure in the rock, carrying with it heat from the moon's interior. Standing near it, they could feel the warmth even through their environmental suits. "We need to find a more sheltered location," Willie said, scanning the canyon walls. "Somewhere we can establish a base and assess our situation." They followed the line of the canyon, moving from one heat vent to another like stepping stones of warmth in the cold. Eventually, they discovered what appeared to be a cave entrance in the canyon wall, partially obscured by ice formations but unmistakable once spotted. Approaching cautiously, Willie used his suit's lights to illuminate the interior. The cave extended deep into the rock, its floor surprisingly level. Most importantly, a small geothermal vent in the rear provided a constant source of heat, raising the cave's internal temperature to just above freezing. Cold by human standards, but survivable without the full protection of their suits. "This will work," Willie declared. "At least temporarily." They established their makeshift shelter, using storage compartments from their suits to create rudimentary furniture. The cave's natural thermal properties, combined with the heat vent, allowed them to conserve suit power by using only minimal life support functions. Willie rigged a system to collect and filter the water that condensed on the cave walls, providing them with a renewable water source. Food was a more pressing concern. Their emergency rations would last only a few days. But as days passed and no pursuit materialized, they began to adapt to their new circumstances. Willie's technical skills proved invaluable, repurposing suit components to create tools and improving their living conditions incrementally. He modified the counter-signal device to draw power from the suit's more efficient cells, giving Lyra longer periods of relief from the worst of her tremors. Lyra, during these periods of relative control, revealed more about xylosian biology. Her species could supplement their nutrition through a form of photosynthesis, absorbing energy from light across specific wavelengths. While the distant star provided minimal radiation, Willie was able to modify one of the suit's emergency beacons to emit light in the spectrum she required, allowing her to regain some strength. Most surprisingly, they discovered a form of lichen growing near the heat vents. Simple organisms adapted to the unique conditions of the geothermal canyon. Lyra's botanical expertise identified these as potentially edible, containing proteins and carbohydrates that, while not ideal, could sustain them when their rations ran out. Alara's resilience continued to impress Willie. The child adapted quickly to their cave dwelling, exploring the nearby areas, always under supervision, and discovering small ice-dwelling creatures that resembled crystalline insects. She named them glitters for the way light refracted through their translucent bodies. As weeks passed, they established a routine. Willie ventured out regularly to collect lichen and check for any signs of pursuit from Outpost 94. Lyra, whose condition gradually improved in the stable environment, focused on cultivating the lichen in the cave, accelerating its growth using her botanical knowledge. Alara became their explorer, her small size allowing her to access narrow fissures in the canyon walls, often returning with discoveries that expanded their understanding of this isolated ecosystem. One evening, as they sat around the soft glow of their modified beacon, Alara, already asleep in her bedding of repurposed suit insulation, Lyra's trembling hand found Willie's. "You never told us why," she said softly. "Why you helped us when no one else would." Willie was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the play of light across the cave wall. Finally, he spoke. "I was a transport pilot, corporate shipping mostly, but sometimes personnel. 5 years ago, I was assigned to transport workers to a mining operation similar to Outpost 94. His voice grew distant with memory. There were warning signs, system malfunctions, pressure anomalies. Protocol said to abort the flight, return to base for full diagnostics. He exhaled slowly. But I had a perfect record. Never missed a delivery deadline. The corporate efficiency bonuses were substantial. I convinced myself the warnings were just sensor glitches. Lyra's hand tightened around his, the tremors momentarily less pronounced. Midway through the journey, the life support system failed completely. Backup systems engaged, but couldn't handle the load. I had 83 workers in cryostasis in the cargo hold. By the time I made emergency landing at the nearest station, 27 had died. 16 more suffered permanent brain damage from improperly terminated cryostasis. Willie finally met Lyra's gaze. The corporation buried the incident, classified it as acceptable operational loss. They reassigned me to Outpost 94 as a technician, a demotion disguised as mercy. I've been hiding here ever since, fixing machines because machines don't judge me for my failure. You've been punishing yourself, Lyra observed. I deserve punishment, Willie replied. Those people trusted me with their lives, and I chose efficiency over safety. And yet, when Alara called for help, you chose differently. Willie had no answer for that. Perhaps he was seeking redemption, or perhaps something in the child's desperate plea had awakened what remained of his humanity after years of self-imposed emotional exile. Over the following months, they transformed their cave into a genuine home. Willie's expeditions discovered more caves connected to their original shelter, expanding their living space. Lyra cultivated various lichen species into a surprisingly diverse food source, even developing methods to improve their taste and nutritional value. Most significantly, Lyra's condition continued to improve. The tremors never disappeared entirely, but with the counter-signal device's continued use and the absence of the cold light treatments, her nervous system began to heal. Eventually, she could go hours without the device before the trembling became debilitating. During one of these good periods, Lyra ventured deeper into the canyon with Willie, discovering a vast cavern where geothermal heat had created a pocket ecosystem more complex than anything they'd found thus far. The cave floor was covered with bioluminescent fungi that responded to their presence by increasing their glow, a defense mechanism that had evolved to deter the cave's natural predators. For Lyra, this discovery was transformative. The fungi's bioluminescence operated on wavelengths remarkably similar to those found on Xylos. Exposure to this light accelerated her healing, reducing her tremors further and bringing color back to her pale blue skin. They transplanted some of these fungi to their living cave, creating a garden that provided both sustenance and therapeutic benefit. Under Lyra's care, the garden flourished, spreading a gentle blue-green glow throughout their dwelling that reminded both Xylosians of home. Willie found himself changing too. The constant vigilance and fear of discovery gradually gave way to something like peace. He still maintained regular patrols to watch for any signs of pursuit from Outpost 94, but as time passed and seasons changed on the moon's surface, the likelihood of Thorn finding them seemed increasingly remote. One cycle, as they observed the distant primary star creating a rare rainbow effect through ice crystals in the canyon, Alara asked the question that had been forming for some time. Are we staying here forever? Willie and Lyra exchanged glances. They had discussed this privately, but reached no definitive conclusion. Would that be so terrible? Willie asked carefully. We have warmth, food, safety. Alara considered this with the seriousness only children can bring to existential questions. I like it here, but Mom's research was important. And you're a pilot, not just a technician. Don't you miss the stars? The question struck Willie with unexpected force. He had been a pilot. Once, the vastness of space had been his home more than any planetary surface. In his self-imposed exile, he had forgotten the joy of navigation, the thrill of charting courses through the infinite. Later, when Alara had gone to tend her own small section of the fungal garden, Lyra approached Willie where he sat maintaining their equipment. She's right. You know, Lyra said, her voice steady with only the faintest tremor underlying her words. We've been surviving, but perhaps it's time to think about living again. Willie looked up at her. In the bioluminescent glow of the fungi, she looked stronger than he had ever seen her. The lines of her face relaxed, her movements more fluid despite the occasional tremor. Thorn and his project still exist, he reminded her. The corporation hasn't changed its methods. No, she agreed. But we have changed. I'm no longer the terrified victim they hunted. You're no longer hiding from your past. She gestured to their cave dwelling, the thriving garden, the improvements Willie had engineered from salvaged suit components. We've built something here that no one thought possible. Perhaps we could do more. What are you suggesting? Lyra's eyes, reflecting the blue-green glow of the fungi, held a determination he had come to know well. There are outposts beyond corporate control, research stations, independent colonies. Places where my work could continue, where Alara could receive proper education, where your skills would be valued. The idea took root in Willie's mind. Not a return to his old life, but the possibility of something new, something better. We need a ship, he said, thinking practically. Outpost 94 has transport vessels, but security has likely forgotten us by now, Lyra finished. It's been nearly a standard year. Thorne's project has either moved forward without me or been abandoned after my failure. The regular security protocols would be in effect, not the heightened measures from when we escaped. She was right. With proper planning and his knowledge of the station systems, accessing a transport might be possible. Risky, certainly, but not impossible. That night, as Alara slept and the bioluminescent fungi cast their gentle light across the cave walls, Willie began to sketch plans. Layouts of Outpost 94's docking bays, access codes he still remembered, potential routes to avoid detection. Lyra watched him work, her eyes bright with hope for the first time since he had found her trembling on that cold metal floor so many months ago. We'll need to prepare carefully, Willie said, looking up from his sketches. Build up supplies, create portable versions of your garden, ensure the countersignal device has backup power sources. Lyra nodded, then gently took the drawing implement from his hand, setting it aside. She moved closer, her slightly trembling fingers framing his face. "Thank you," she said softly, "for fixing us when we were broken." Willie shook his head. "I didn't fix you. You were never broken, just damaged. You fix yourself." And, he added after a moment, "You fix me too." In the gentle glow of the fungi that had become their unlikely salvation, their lips met, a promise of a future neither had dared to imagine before finding each other in the cold depths of Outpost 94. Morning brought renewed purpose. They began preparations for an eventual return to Outpost 94, not as fugitives, but as determined travelers with a destination beyond corporate space. Willie modified their remaining suit components into more practical clothing and tools. Lyra cultivated hardy strains of the bioluminescent fungi that could survive transport. Alara, excited by the prospect of new worlds, collected specimens of her beloved glitters and other small organisms unique to their canyon. Their plan would take time to implement. Months of preparation, careful reconnaissance, precise timing. But for the first time since a desperate child had pleaded for someone to fix her trembling mother, they had something more powerful than fear driving them forward. They had hope, and in the warming glow of the fungi garden they had nurtured together, that hope illuminated possibilities as vast as the stars Willie once navigated and as resilient as the trembling hands that now held his without fear.